From the perspective of Invest Vancouver, what does Vancouver mean, and can you paint for us the picture of what Vancouver is?
Thanks. It's a great question. And as someone who was born at Women's Hospital in Vancouver and grew up on Vancouver Island and came home to Vancouver, I think ultimately we often identify with our physical assets, the mountains and the water. But I think it's the draw of the mountains and the water, the people that are there, the talent that makes the difference. And I did just want to acknowledge as we begin the panel that we do very much work with our Indigenous communities, the 10 communities that exist across the Metro Vancouver region. And that's a big part of the landscape as well, is that diversity and that acceptance that we have, which ultimately draws the type of talent that we want to see to support the economy.
Mm-hmm. And I was wondering, Tomica, if you can jump in on that. I know you're also not originally from Vancouver, so I'd love to hear your perspective on what Vancouver is like and how you feel the quality of life plays with the business community and the innovation community.
I also moved to Vancouver probably 12, 13 years ago from San Francisco, from the Bay Area. And at that time, the tech sector there was experiencing a bit of turbulence, similar to what we're seeing today. And what I noticed in Vancouver was a lot more stability and resilience. We tend to grow things more in a kind of slow and steady and sustainable and inclusive way. And I think that's what makes Vancouver different from a lot of other ecosystems. We're seeing, as our minister mentioned yesterday, fastest growing tech hub in North America. We also have a ministry called the Jedi Ministry, which if that doesn't show our dedication to geeks and innovation, I don't know what does. And it's just, we're seeing a lot of critical mass that I think has taken time to build. So Innovate BC, we did a study a couple years ago a couple months ago about unicorns, and there's around 12 or 13 unicorns now in Vancouver. But that's a story that's 12 years in the making, which maybe coincides with the time that I moved there, but maybe it's just a coincidence. But so we're seeing a lot of critical mass, and also, it's consistently named one of the top places in the world to live. As somebody who has a family and has kids, I just think it's a great place to live, explore, and grow your business and live a really balanced life.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I see this too as someone who's moved here and is also growing a business here as well. And we have on our panel, Yanira is here and is able to share her story. She's in the process of moving to Vancouver at the moment. She has an amazing business that I'm sure she'll tell us a bit more about. And hopefully that will be able to give a bit of a perspective on how companies could move here, what's attractive, and what's the process for them to do so. So what would you say attracted you to Vancouver in the first place?
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Yanira from Rockhopper. And as Kate mentioned, we are in the process to move our company to Vancouver. And for me, it is because it's tech ecosystem. It is amazing, like, this city have a great talent from top universities, and they have like these ways to finance companies like mine, and access to great mentors as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and can you talk a bit about the process for you? So how are you finding settlement? How are you finding resources for how you'll attract talent or move yourself and your company? What supports are there for you?
Yeah, back in 2019, I attended to the BRAR Global Summit in Vancouver. And then I met Ray Walia. He is the CEO at Launch Academy. And we are in the Maple program. We are like in the middle of that process. They help us a lot with the migration process, the incorporation. Then they gave us this letter of support, like to be able to move our company to Vancouver. And we expect to grow our company there. And very excited for that.
That's awesome. And how have you found the process? You can be honest as well. Have you found the whole process?
Well, it's a little bit overwhelming, but the advantage is that Launch Academy is making such a great job. They divided this process by steps, so it is much easier like that way, like very easy to process for us as founders, that we have a lot of stuff like going on. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we talked yesterday at the dinner about what it would mean to move talent and establish your company here in terms of talent. So I'd love to tap into Chris I'd love to get your perspective on what's the East Coast perspective and what talent is like in Vancouver.
Okay, thanks, Kate. Maybe just for context about who I am. So I'm the only one based on this panel, based in the U.S., and I'm the representative of the government of British Columbia, based in Boston and covering from Maine down to Florida. But my colleague Will Fox is here, who's our managing director, and we have a team as well on the West Coast. So we're about a team of 7 here. And we're actually here trying to help tell the story of Vancouver and British Columbia. And it's a wonderful story to tell you. I will tell you, as a person that gets up every day trying to connect with companies, trying to connect with venture capital firms, and also to support our British Columbian companies, we're trying to get them to the East Coast, is that the East Coast is not highly aware of Vancouver and British Columbia. They are aware of Whistler. Vancouver Olympics was a fantastic branding exercise, still paying dividends today. So I am based there trying to help tell that story. There is a north-south divide or a focus from the U.S. companies looking at Toronto and Quebec. But the story that we have that's really generating here, which is I'm so happy, and I've been with the province for 8 years. This is a wonderful event. So many companies that we're meeting from British Columbia, but also companies and corporates that are in here in the world, some major companies here today that are looking to what BC has to offer and what Vancouver as an ecosystem has to offer. So we're happy to be here.
Ooh, I had some mild applause there. What resources and what benefits, such as friendly immigration or employment rules or tax incentives, are there for people to move to BC and set up their companies in BC?
So for us, we're working with companies that are not necessarily moving their companies, they're putting remote teams. And so every day they're struggling with trying to understand where they should be thinking about their global expansion plan. So we compete every day as well with Montreal and Toronto and Colorado and the West Coast, particularly for me from the East Coast. And even London and Germany, where they're looking at these, where they can put their teams. I think the greatest story that we have about Vancouver and BC is the access to the homegrown talent, the ability to be able to bring in international high-value talent or highly skilled workforce as well, and just having that lower overall operating cost and that risk of expanding to some of the other global markets is significantly reduced when you go to Canada and to BC. And then you have the great shred credits that are a key driver. I'm not sure if all the BC companies are leveraging them. They should be. I know that the international companies, the U.S. companies that we're working with, when they come up there, that is a key driver. So when you can access those, it becomes a very compelling position for them to set up a team in BC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And just to build on that, Tomica, I'd love to loop back to your earlier point when you mentioned the unicorns. Yeah. It has become Unicorn City. I think it was 11 unicorns in 11 months, which is a pretty impressive statistic back in 2021. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about why you think that happened, not just because obviously that's when you moved here. Why you think that happened and what are the factors that contribute to making it conducive for creating unicorns like that?
Yeah, well, it is funny because I actually remember some of these companies just starting out. So I think the important thing to know is it's not an overnight success story. What we learned is that on average it took about 12 years, right, to build a unicorn. And that's what really we're focused on is more of that kind of sustainable and inclusive growth, not just kind of rise fast and crash fast. It's like, how do we build that critical mass and momentum to grow sustainable businesses? And I think we've reached the point now where there is that critical mass, and I think it's such a great time to start and grow a business. Because you can benefit from the learnings of these companies that have now grown, from other larger multinationals that are setting up shop there, and then the talent space as well. That's all kind of coming back into the ecosystem. So yeah, it's definitely not an overnight success story. And there's also a lot of government support for companies. Around 80% of those ventures did access government support in some way, whether that's through various accelerators and incubators that offer mentorship, funding to hire and train talent, or funding to commercialize research. A lot of these supports are provided, through Innovate BC and through the province and other kind of players in the ecosystem, and community as well. I think that's one of the great things that, you mentioned Launch Academy, Frontier Collective. Something that people need when they come to a new city or they're starting a business is being able to bounce ideas off of people, learn from others' mistakes, and kind of benefit from that communal knowledge. And that's something that I think Vancouver does really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the overnight success, the non-overnight success story. You always hear about the quick turnarounds, but really these things take a long time to grow. And one of the comments that I think is often made about Vancouver and BC is that companies are created and then they sell. And that's traditionally been what's happened in the past. But recently we've seen more of a shift where companies are maintaining a presence in Vancouver and BC and they're choosing to grow and scale there, which is a contributor to the unicorn conversation too, of course. So I'd love to ask Jacquie, what do you feel is contributing to that increased staying power in Vancouver and BC in the last 5-10 years?
I think ultimately it's a transference from what was and is an incredible startup ecosystem to the talent that is made available then for those larger MNEs that are landing. And so I think we're being very much recognized globally as an ecosystem within which there is that incredible talent. It may initially be working in a startup environment. I think the other piece is now what we're starting to see with the growth and the recognition of the unicorns is some of these companies, whether it's on the life sciences side with a group like Accelera or others, is just that recognition that where it might have in the past been a startup, now there's that commitment and the support through the various programs to allow it to grow, to bring in the venture capital it needs and the other supports. So I think it's almost a perfect evolution from where we were as very much a startup ecosystem and then maturing into this state where that availability of talent created through that startup process is now feeding the infusion of capital and the investment that we're seeing that allows for the growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that maturity, I think, is a central topic because, as we've mentioned, there's fantastic supports for startups. A lot of VCs I talk to actually say that early stage companies in BC and Vancouver are doing okay just because of the level of government support that exists. So it's interesting as the ecosystem matures, there's that foundation then that's going to grow with it. So it's only going to keep compounding on itself as things get bigger, more availability becomes a priority for government and investment in that sense. People who are migrating to Vancouver, top of mind for them might be questions around DEI. And I think, for me, that's something that makes the province so attractive is that receptiveness to people who are from a different place. And I'd love to ask Chris on the spot. I saw you looking away there. Can you talk a bit about the impact that you think DEI has on bringing people to Vancouver? Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
That's a great question. I think that's a tough question.
I did put you on the spot.
We're talking to companies and that are considering their international footprint and where they're looking to go. I think that, as a person that's on the East Coast, there's a lot of companies that are looking at the West Coast, and I think that we compete very, very solidly with them when it comes to that diversity aspect of it. I think Canada has always had as a perception, as I want everyone to know that I'm an American representing the great province of British Columbia. But the perception as an American, if I could speak in that role as well as my role in the province, is that there is this knowledge of how open and inclusive particularly British Columbia is. And that's part of a story that we help tell as well. And it is, I will say, in my career working in economic development, it is actually part of the discussion points that we have with companies. And so I don't know of any other better place in terms of diversity, inclusion, and the progressiveness in terms of how they think about it, in terms of how it impacts businesses than BC. So I'm proud to be part of that storytelling in the East Coast.
Mm-hmm. Jacquie, I know you want to jump in.
I might just add to that, and I'm pretty sure Innovate BC will have some things to say because they're doing some incredible work in this space. But I think one of the reasons that our talent is not tapped out, and when we're meeting with investors and they're asking about what's available, is because we were at the forefront in terms of what it means to have a diverse equitable and inclusive workforce, particularly in the tech scene. We have a highly educated, over 55% of Canadians have a degree. 42% of individuals that are in the Metro Vancouver region do not originally, were not born in Canada. And so all that lends itself to that diverse talent ecosystem. And it's so much easier to look at what's in front of you in terms of talent when you are coming with that diverse lens, that inclusive lens, and ultimately that's what creates the stronger system for us.
Yeah, and I think I'd just like to add, I think there's a lot of intention. We're being intentional about it. It's not just, okay, if we so happen to have a diverse and inclusive workforce, there's a lot of programming created specifically for that. So whether it's hiring grants to hire and train talent, specifically to hire people who are from underrepresented groups to introduce them to the tech sector, that's a program that we ran with funding from the province, or setting up of NBC, $500 million strategic investment fund. They're looking at things like ESG and looking at the how businesses are going to incorporate these types of goals and metrics in their businesses. And it's kind of having a rippling effect throughout the whole investment community. I think we're going to see a lot more of that happening. But I think Vancouver and BC has been doing it for maybe longer. So I think I'm hoping that our businesses will be set up in a way to do that better and then take advantage of those opportunities. And really, when we look at the workforce, right, we know that tech is impacting every single sector. Someone was saying yesterday that tech is in a vertical; it's in absolutely every single industry, and we need to make sure that there is training and resources available, so that, as you were saying, we don't just tap out. That we can have a very inclusive workforce that gets to benefit from those great jobs and career opportunities in the tech sector.
That's awesome. And Yanira, how's your experience? Have you found that it's been welcoming? Because, we can swivel all day about how great we think it is, but you're the person with the real experience here.
Super welcoming. Yeah, it is amazing. Like, I can't wait to move to Vancouver.
Yeah, we got a yay. We got a yay there.
Yeah.
And just to wrap this panel up for everyone, I think we've had some really insightful comments. I'd love to ask you for one or two sentences about what you think makes Vancouver unique. Chris, I'll start with you. I've been putting you on the spot all day today.
No, it's okay. But I come from a different perspective of talking to companies and also helping our British Columbia companies be successful here in the U.S. What makes it unique from that perspective is the culture. It's the business environment, the openness for business. It's obviously the support that is provided by the provincial and municipal and the federal government. All of these things give a kind of a great recipe for us to be able to make a great case for why BC and Vancouver particularly are great places to do business. I guess it goes back to a great story. We're a competitive province, a competitive region, and it is about doing things like this, what we're doing today and this week, by telling our story. And if I could just say, having our BC companies tell their stories. Since I've been here, we've met Alex, who I've been talking to right over here. If not everyone has engaged with Alex and his technology there, please do. If I could share one other thing too, we met last night, Ben, with Eventbase, a company that does, I don't know if anybody knows this, or maybe everyone does, is that the app was developed for South by Southwest is here, done by a British Columbia company. These are phenomenal stories, and I get super excited to be able to now tell those stories. And I don't know I would have made those connections if it wasn't for today and for the Frontier Collective and for South by Southwest, and also our minister who's here, who's brought us here as well. So I'm very appreciative of that, and good story to tell.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think our stories are definitely a particular piece of uniqueness. But Tomica, what do you find most unique about Vancouver?
I think there's something to be said about this particular moment in time too, just the critical mass that has been created with the companies that we have that are growing there, the talent that's being developed, the kind of more stability around the economic environment, and the fact that it's also just a beautiful place and a great place to live and raise your family or your business. A lot of these things have been moving and in progress for a while, but I kind of feel like it's all coming together in this. I think you were saying just this kind of magical moment of the right ingredients being in place right now. So yeah, I would definitely highly recommend anyone considering it to come check it out. And you can ski and go to the beach in the same day.
You can. I've done
Yeah.
it multiple times. Jacquie, what do you think is the most unique thing about Vancouver?
I think as I start to travel the world more with this job and understand more about other parts, I think what differentiates Vancouver is what I'll describe as family. And family is whatever it means to you, it's whatever it means to me. But I think for anyone who's looking to set up in the Metro Vancouver region, within British Columbia, what they'll find is it is a very supportive system, so very collaborative. So even if you are setting up your own business, you're not alone. If you're setting up through an M&E, whatever you're doing, you're not alone. It's an environment within which others want to see you succeed. And I think that's really powerful and distinguishes us from many other parts of the world.
I'd agree with that. I think coming from the... No one wants to hear from me. However, I agree with that. It feels like more of an air of collaboration rather than competition, if I could summarize that very poorly. Thank you. And Yanira, I'm really interested to hear from you because obviously you're in the process of moving. What is it that you think makes Vancouver the most unique?
For me, it is the opportunity to grow my business to its fullest potential in a great environment. I mean, this community is amazing. This support that I'm seeing, this doesn't exist at my country.
That's awesome. Well, Holden's given me the time hand, the wrap it up hand. So let's give all of our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you so much for coming up today.